Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you're watching from. I'm calling in today from the center of the universe, John Travera's town, the big TO, Toronto. And of course, I'm Aaron Bloxel, and this is Matthew Balzer. And together we make B&B Hockey Talk. So make sure you hit the like button. If you share our feed, we're going to give you a shout out on our next episode. And of course, your comments are very key to us building this show. So today we've got our continuation of 31 teams in 31 days with the Calgary Flames. But before we do that, Matthew's going to take us through the latest signings since our last episode, and then we're going to jump right into it. So Matthew, what you got for us?
All right, so the backbone of the Vegas Golden Knights, Marc-Andre Fleury, got a new 3-year deal worth $21 million. This contract will make him the fourth highest paid goalie in the NHL when the contract does start. What can you say about Fleury? He was all world for Vegas last year, taking them all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals, and basically playing like Jonathan Quick when LA played that won their first Stanley Cup in that playoff run, basically being lights out until the finals. This is the key signing that they really needed.
Absolutely. What else? I know there's a lot more signings around the NHL, so let's jump into those as well.
All right, and then a few minor deals. Montreal signed Joel Armia to a 1-year, $1.85 million contract. Armia they got from in a trade from Winnipeg, so Winnipeg could unload the Steve Mason contract. That was a key player that they got. The Dallas Stars signed Devin Shore to a 2-year deal with a $2.3 million cap hit. He's a good bottom six forward. He had 32 points this year. And lastly, the Toronto Maple Leafs signed the Calder Cup winner and playoff MVP Andreas Johnsson to a 1-year extension. And he's should be go to play with Kadri on the third line with the Leafs this coming year.
And of course, right after our episode ended last night, gold medalist Penny Alexiuk's brother signed again with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So no big surprise there. I think that was expected. The guy's, he's a pretty solid stay-at-home defenseman. So, well, we get to talk about Vancouver's hated rival, the Calgary Flames. I know it's a big rival. When I was younger, growing up in the late '80s, early '90s, it was a huge rival, and there was a lot of hatred towards the Calgary Flames. If you're a Canucks fan, I love to hate the Calgary Flames, but we get to talk about them today. And they got a good-looking team that's going to compete again for a potential playoff spot. So why don't you take us through, starting with the forwards?
All right. So they added some key pieces this year. Their top line could be one of the most dangerous lines in this year's NHL. You got Johnny Gaudreau, Sean Monahan, and their big signing James Neal on their top line. Neal is that goal scorer that they've needed for Johnny Gaudreau. For a long time, they haven't had anybody on that right side. And Monahan is his consistent self. He'll get 30 goals, 60 points, most likely this year. Their second line is their good checking line. Matthew Tkachuk, Michael Backlund, and Michael Frolik. Backlund got a big extension there, I think around $5 million a year. And Matthew Tkachuk, as we all know here in Vancouver, is the guy the Canucks passed up to take Olli Juolevi. We'll see in the future how that does turn out once when Juolevi finally gets into the NHL. But Tkachuk could be primed for another big step, probably 60 points somewhere around this year. Their third line, I have a Sam Bennett, Derek Ryan, and Elias Lindholm. Ryan and Lindholm were added from Carolina, with Calgary getting their new coach Bill Peters, who coached Carolina last year. So he brought in some of his former team players. Ryan can play up and down the lineup. He had 38 points last year. Lindholm can also be a top six option as well. And Bennett, or the 18-year-old Sam Bennett, from the one playoff year. He's been a disappointment so far with Calgary, but we'll see how he does this year. And then the fourth line I have is Curtis Lazar, Mark Jankowski, and Troy Brouwer. Jankowski, who was a first-round pick many years ago, finally made a jump to the NHL and started to make a good fit in that bottom six. Lazar is he's still been a disappointment for the first round pick that he was. And Brouwer, I know Calgary has been trying to move him, but his cap hit of over $4 million, I believe, is tough to move with the reduction he has. And then as some added forwards, they added Austin Czarnik over from Boston on a 2-year deal. He's an intriguing player. He had 69 points in 64 games in the American League last year. He has had a few cups of coffee with Boston over the years, and he has shown that he can produce a little bit in the NHL. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. Garnet Hathaway and Alan Quine, who they signed over from the New York Islanders, are another depth forwards.
Yeah, definitely going to be an interesting group to watch and to keep forward. One of the things I noticed right away looking at this roster is how significantly smaller they've become. They've always had big bodies, lots of heavy players. Of course, they lost Michael Furland in the trade with Carolina. And they've got some still pending UFAs that haven't signed on with anybody that are significant big bodies. Like we'll touch on those in a bit, so I won't give away those names yet. But they've got at least 3 players that I see up and down this roster that are, well over 210, 220 pounds that would add a lot of physicality to it. They're definitely getting lighter and faster, and with guys like Sam Bennett potentially maturing, they're going to get younger because obviously Tkachuk's still very young, Monahan and Goudreau. I mean, the core of this team is fairly young yet. So I definitely like the way they're doing, but for me, the defense. Let's touch on the defense a little bit. Biggest thing I noticed about their defense, I know a couple of years ago when they brought in Travis Hominick, they were one of those teams I thought, man, they're really starting to look like the Nashville Predators on D. They had the big 4. Obviously, they made that trade with Carolina. That's shaking things up. So let's touch on those defensemen. First of all, we got Mark Giordano with Troy Brody. Noah Hannafin coming over in the Carolina trade with Travis Hominick. Solid top 4. And they've got some great support players in Kulak and Michael Stone, along with Dylan Prout. They're looking pretty solid for their 7, but it's those front 4 that are really going to log a lot of the ice time and minutes. And Michael Stone, through injury or penalty killing, will be relied on as well. So, what do you think about their defense? How do you see them shaping up this year yourself?
Yeah, like last year, I thought they would have one of the best defense in the NHL, even though it didn't turn out like that. I think with the Noah Hannafin, Dougie Hamilton trade there, getting Hannafin, they're able to move Brody back with Giordano this year, which I think will really help Giordano's game as he didn't have the best season last year. But yeah, Hannafin, a good young defenseman. There were rumors that the Canucks were looking to get him, which I'm thankful that they didn't, seeing that it would have been the 7th overall pick, most likely going back, which would have been too much.
Yeah.
And Hamonic, I'm hoping he gets a big step this year, as he did struggle a little bit here and there, but overall, I really like their defense.
Well, let's touch on their goaltending. I know you're a big fan of, a couple of their up-and-comers. Let's talk about what you got there for their goaltending depth.
All right, so this will be the biggest thing for the Flames this coming year because they got a good core up front. They got a good core on their defense. The big thing will be how their goaltending shapes up with Mike Smith returning back as the number 1 goalie. He did go on good stretches, especially at the start of the season. He was playing really well, but after he got injured about midway through the season, and eventually when he came back, he struggled a lot in that. But a big part of that was not having a consistent backup goalie who could play well to give them nights off. There'll be a few options, both returning young goalies. David Rittich was the backup goalie to start the year last year. He did start off strong, but when Smith went down to injury, he started to struggle a little bit. And the other goalie who they're really high on that they want to be the number one goalie eventually is John Gillies, who remember he played for the U.S. at the World Juniors a few years ago, and I believe led them to the gold medal. Both of those goalies will be battling for that backup job. I think Gillies will win that backup job. But the big thing is getting rest for Mike Smith, so he can continue to play well.
Well, I think the big thing there is Mike Smith staying healthy. He seems to be a really fragile goaltender. Always seems to get at least one major injury every year. And, even back when he was with Arizona, Arizona would have great seasons when he was healthy, but would fall apart whenever he went down with injuries. So I'm going to touch on a handful of their UFAs. Feel free to jump in afterwards and add some to this list because I know there's more than a few still out there. We talked about some of the big bodies that they're losing in Chris Stewart, Tanner Glass, and some skill players like Chris Versteeg and Matt Stajan. Obviously, those players can still re-sign. They're free to re-sign anywhere. And so far, I think because of Calgary's salary cap, more than likely won't be coming back. And I know as you touch on some of these UFAs and share your opinion with them, also touch on their RFA situation.
All right, yeah. So a couple other guys that they have, Nick Shore, who they brought in a trade from Ottawa, can be a good fourth line center pickup. And one other guy, I know he never really played for Calgary, but he was a first-round pick for them. Emil Poirier, basically is a big bust for them. I think he was the same draft year as Mark Jankowski. I think Calgary had 3 first-round picks that year, but Jankowski is about the only guy to come out that has really been able to take a step into the NHL. Calgary's RFA situation is interesting. They just have a little under $13 million in cap space left, but they still have to re-sign Elias Lindholm and Noah Hannafin, who they got from Carolina. And both of those guys will be wanting a big pay raise. So you could look between $8 and $9 million just going to those two guys. And then on top of that, they still have to re-sign Gillies and Rittich for their goalies. Brett Kulak, who was a good bottom 6 defenseman for them, Mark Jankowski, and Garnet Hathaway, who was in and out of the lineup for them last year. So it will be interesting. It could be a cap crunch there, which I also brought up earlier, like trying to get rid of Troy Brouwer's contract somehow, and maybe moving one of these other younger forwards potentially to free up cap space to sign these guys.
Well, let's talk about some of their younger players, some of their prospects. I know we both have a few people on the list, so why don't I get you to start us off, go through some of the players that stand out to you on their prospects list, and then I'll touch on a couple on mine.
All right. So first off, I got Spencer Fu, who they signed out of college last year. He had a pretty good rookie season in the American League. He had 20 goals, 39 points in 32 games. And he got called up at the end of the last year and scored 2 goals in 4 games for them. Don't see that right side up front is pretty backed up with all those guys with Neal, Frolik, and Lindholm. So it's going to be tough, especially with how skilled he is to get into a spot where he'll be most effective. Another guy I have is Rasmus Anderson, defensive prospect. Him and also I'll throw out Oliver Kylington. Both of these guys had really good years in the American League. Anderson, 39 points in 56 games. Kylington, 35 points in 62 games. Both of these guys will be looking to get playing time in the NHL this year, and especially with a guy like Kulak, who doesn't bring as much offensive ability as these two guys potentially could. They could get a shot at the NHL this year. And lastly, I'll bring up the other goalie that they have in their system, Tyler Parsons, who was a big part of the U.S. World Junior win, as Canada lost in that shootout, and probably one of the best hockey games I've ever seen. He played most of the year in the East Coast League, though, so we'll see how his development continues this year. But he should be playing more in the American League this year.
Excellent. A few guys I got on the list: defenseman Juuso Välimäki, potential guy to make the team this year, but I think he's going to need some more seasoning in the farm team, or potentially even overseas. They might do what the Canucks did and send him to Finland. A couple of guys that I can see them calling up this year if they run into injuries is Morgan Klimchuk, and of course ex-Vancouver Canuck Hunter Shinkaruk, who both you and I were very high on, and we're sad to see the Canucks trade him to Calgary in the Michael Granlund deal. And, we were stunned that that's all they got for him, but it's looked like it's been a pretty good move so far for the Canucks. So another guy that's a bit of a long shot is Dylan Dubé. He was a second-round pick a few years back, and he's made some progress, but I think he's more of a depth player at this point. So Calgary Flames last year finished with 84 points total in the standings. Not good enough for a playoff spot. Where do you see them finishing this year? Where's your point threshold?
This will be interesting to see how they do. A big thing will be goaltending, because I think everything else, if it stacks up, they should be going for that one of those 2 wild card spots. Mm-hmm. As much as I'd like to put them in the playoffs, I might put them in that 9-10 position, just because I don't think goaltending will. I think the goaltending will end up being their downfall and missing out on the playoffs. So I'll put them at sort of like the 90, 92 point range.
Okay. Yeah, I have them down as being around the 90-point range. I think it's going to take typically about 93 to 95 points to make the playoffs. So they'll be right there on the fringe. But I actually don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year. I think goaltending will bite them in the butt a little bit. And just potentially some key injuries with some players that are known for getting injured throughout the season. Because as we know, if Gaudreau or Monahan typically go down, they are what the team is. And they'll really suffer through those injuries. So, again, if you really like our episodes here, please hit the like button. Give us a share. We'll give you a shout-out. Thanks so much again for watching. This has been B&B Hockey Talk with Aaron Bloxel and Matthew Balzer. We'll be back again next week on Monday as we continue the 31 teams in 31 days. Thanks so much again for watching, everyone. Have a fantastic evening. And we'll see you next week.